Hello and welcome back. Now, briefly in this video, before we start creating our consumer, so it's appropriate that we just briefly talk about Rabbitmq and some of the properties that it has and what it entails. Now, I decided not to create a slide for in explaining this. I saw this documentation. It's very good. Okay, so just to give an overview and an understanding of what Rabbitmq does. Okay, so right here it says Rabbitmq is a message queuing software, also known as a message broker or a queue manager. Okay, it's a software queues are defined to which applications connect in order to transfer a message or messages. Okay, so it's a queue or a message broker where you have a producer that sends a message, the queue processes and then sends to the appropriate consumer. So it's a message queuing software. Maybe you might be familiar with Kafka. Okay, Kafka, Rabbitmq, they are all almost the same. Okay, you have a producer, you have a queue or a message broker, and you have a consumer. Okay, now this is how it is. This is just the basic idea. So the message comes from a producer, and you have a message queue. Okay, it could be one message, could be multiple messages, and then it is dequeued and then sent to the appropriate consumer. Okay, so for our notification service, we are only going to have a consumer. We are not going to have any producer. Okay, so we are only going to consume messages from other services. Now, the messages can include any type of message. It could be strings, it could be objects, but mostly if you are sending objects, if you are sending other type of data that is not string, you will need to stringify them. Okay, so you stringify those data, and then when in the consumer, you can pass the data to the original format. Okay, so now if we scroll down here, this exactly what I just said. You have a producer right here that produces or publishes a message. Okay, and in our own case, this producer could be our auth service sign up. So when a user creates an account, we publish a message. Okay, and then it goes to the message broker. Okay, now it is within this message broker where we have multiple queues. We have queues, we have also we have routing keys, we have exchanges. That exchange will be used to route the message to the appropriate consumer. So this is just the basic idea: a producer, a message broker, and then your consumers. It could be one-to-one. Okay, I've already said something like that before. It could be one-to-one or one-to-many. Okay, so one-to-one, you send a direct message to just a particular consumer, or one-to-many, you send a fan-out message. So a producer sends a message and all consumers listening for that message will consume the message. Okay, now these are some other informations on why you can use Rabbitmq, because we are implementing the event-driven asynchronous, taking the event-driven and asynchronous approach. We need a message queue because we don't want to use request-response approach or request-response pattern where you send the message and then you wait for a response. Okay, now this is another good diagram. Okay, so PDF creation. The user sends a PDF creation request. Okay, from the browser to the producer. It says the user sends a PDF creation request to the web application. Now the web application, which is the producer, sends a message to Rabbitmq. Okay, so sends a message to Rabbitmq, and inside the queue you have your exchange, you have your routing keys, you have your queues. Okay, there could be multiple exchanges inside the queue or the message broker, and there could be multiple queues. Okay, so note that there could be multiple exchanges and multiple queues. That includes data from a request such as name and email. The exchange accepts the messages from the producer. So it is the exchange inside the message broker that accepts the messages from the producer and then routes those messages to the correct queues. Now, in order for the exchange to route the messages to the correct queue, we need a routing key. Now, if we are using a one-to-one or a direct approach or direct messaging, then we'll need a routing key. But for the fan out, every consumer that is listening for the messages will just consume the message. Now the PDF processing worker, which is the consumer, receives the task message and starts processing the PDF. So this is just the idea from the web application to the producer to the exchange, and then the exchange routes to the queue. Like I said, you could have multiple exchanges, multiple queues. So the exchange is what knows which queue to route the messages to. And then every consumer listening to that specific queue will get the message. Okay? So this is how an exchange works. Messages are not published directly to a queue. So as you can see, as explained already here, messages don't go directly to a queue. They go to an exchange. Okay? And then it is the exchange that will then route the messages to the appropriate queues. Okay? So there are different types of exchanges. Okay? Now you could read this information. I think you can search for this online, cloudamqp.com. Okay. Now there are different types of exchanges. There is the direct exchange. We are going to use this where you just send a direct message and then the exchange sends it directly to the queue. Okay. Then we have the topic exchange. Okay. So the topic exchange could be routed to multiple queues. Okay. And then we have the fan out exchange. So the ones that we're going to use is the direct exchange and the fan out exchange. Okay. So for the direct, the message is routed to the queues whose binding key exactly matches the routing key. Okay. So for the direct exchange, we're going to set up a routing key, and then any queue that matches that routing key will get the message directly. And then a fan out exchange routes messages to all queues bound to that queue, bound to it. So all queues bound to that particular exchange will get for the fan out. Then we have the topic. If you want to send for a particular topic to particular queues, okay. So maybe you have a seller queue. You want to send only topics related to that queue, or buyers, you could. And then we have the headers exchange, uses message headers attributes. But what we are mostly interested in is the direct message and the fan out message. Now quickly, the Rabbitmq concept, we've talked about producer. So a producer sends the messages, consumer receives or consumes the messages. Then we have a queue. A queue is what stores the messages. Okay, so a queue is what stores the messages until a consumer is available to consume the messages. And then a message is what is sent. The message is usually sent in a stringified format. So if you're sending an object, you have to stringify it. If you're sending a boolean, you have to stringify it. But if it's a normal string, you can just send. Then we have the connection. So we already set up our own connection. Then we create a channel. So a channel is a virtual connection inside a connection. Okay. So when publishing or consuming messages from a queue, it's all done over a channel. Then we have exchange. It's what receives the messages from the producer and then sends them or directs them to the appropriate queues using routing or binding keys. Now, binding is a link between a queue and an exchange. Then routing key is what an exchange uses to send messages to a queue. Okay. And then we have the advanced messaging protocol. We already set that up. If you check our .env file right here, the protocol used is AMQP. Okay. And then we have users. We already created one user. Remember our username and our password, and then virtual hosts, vhost and virtual host. So it provides a way to segregate applications using the same Rabbitmq instance. For our own case, we're just using one Rabbitmq instance. Okay. So I think this just gives an overview. I decided not to create slides myself, so this makes much sense to just go through this. You can search online for this information so you get an idea of what Rabbitmq does. So what we need to just think about are producers, queues, exchanges, routing keys, consumers. Okay, so those are the things that we really need to think about. And then channels, connections, we already have all of that set up.